Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special called workshop of the Danville City Commission for today, Wednesday, December the 1st, 2021. The hour is 3 p.m. And before I call us to order, I believe Commissioner Cottle would like to have a small word.
Yeah, a small word. All I really wanted to do was to thank the airport board for their patience, and I know that some of this has seemed rather tedious, but there's a legal process that we have to go through, and so that made it seem like we were dragging our feet or trying to do something, under the table. So I appreciate your patience on that. I appreciate Earl for all getting this information. I know you worked very hard on some of the things we asked you to get for us, and so I hope today everybody realizes we're gathering information and hope to have a good, open and honest discussion because I think we all want the same thing. So that I will leave it at that, and thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I'll follow on and say thank you for being here and thank you for your interest. And I think at the end of this well-prepared factual presentation, I think it will become obvious that we're actually on the same team here. So without any further delay, I will invite our city manager to continue on.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, and the Airport Board. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate that and appreciate your all's patience as we've gone through what has seemed like a confusing process, and we'll talk about that first and briefly. The process, and obviously we'll hop right into it, and we'll try to keep the entirety of the presentation as simple as we can. First, the process was there was a need established to review the southern boundary of the city or consider a southern annexation. And staff worked through that request and then what was considered a reasonable discussion boundary. And so then we developed and proposed this boundary, provided that to the commission based on the information we had and in a review of the existing city services and the boundary of Junction City and then the boundaries of again, the city service area of utilities. Then we asked the commission if that was something that they wanted to consider, and a notice of intent was filed. That notice of intent then opened us up for the process that we are now towards the end of, which was we wanted to investigate the possible issues, identify the concerns around the proposed annexation, identify specific detailed questions of those impacted along the annexed corridor, and the airport being the end user of that. We conducted and wanted to conduct a review on site with the airport staff and airport users and airport board members. We are providing a detail in response to those questions or that investigation of the issues, that response to the airport board as it relates to the airport board and the city commission is occurring today. Some of the landowners, for example, along the way, or some of the other individuals that we've spoken to have had very narrow questions, and we've addressed those at the time of their questions. For example, some folks thought that there was an annexation to the east of the proposed boundary. We clarified that immediately, and we haven't heard back from those folks. And so we've engaged in those conversations along the way, and as those have came up, we've made an effort to address those. Back to the airport board, which is the purpose for today's meeting. We are communicating outwardly after today, continue to do that to any impacted party, and that is ongoing. We met with landowners, multiple landowners over the last 48 hours. We've met with and discussed with some of the airport users over the last 48 hours, and we'll continue to do that until the city commission makes a decision or makes a thought towards the actual final decision, which is the last bullet point, consider annexation. So that's the process that we've been engaged in, which has been, again, going on for about 70 days now, plus or minus. So when we discuss, the first point is need to establish a review of the southern annexation, then we developed a proposed boundary. Why did we get down to the airport? And as we learned during the Economic Development Symposium in August, the future of aviation is the future of our economy in ways. It is integral to our economy thanks to things such as the projected demand for pilots and aircraft means that the development of those employees, the infrastructure around those airplanes and support the aviation industry is a critical piece of our education system, our incubator system for staff and businesses to support the endeavor of aviation. The demand for logistics is very high, is only increasing, and will continue to increase as the capacity of your interstate system, the capacity of your large transportation systems are burdened with more and more passenger traffic. The logistics and the efficiency of air delivery is becoming more and more economical for the large companies. And also, we have to understand the global nature of aviation, as was pointed out to us, and that the key statistic in that slide is that the economic benefit to having a corporate jet on your airplane is about $2.5 million to your community. And a corporate jet is defined as basically a private jet use or private plane used for business. And the average is a $2.5 million impact per plane, right? And then also the times of aviation has changed. And so the other statistics over there on the left bottom corner is the 80% number, is that 80% of traffic goes through small general aviation type airports, and which is very interesting to us. And it also, the nature of aviation being led towards the electric age means that the location and geography of GA airports is the importance of those is only going to increase with time. So it is an exciting time for the future of aviation, which is why we considered the boundary extending all the way to the airport in this case, and that's where we began our study. And so as we got past the basic boundary and we got into what are some of the issues, we began to meet with the airport board and the tenants at the airport. We met with many stakeholders. We met with individual property owners. We met with really a sundry of people. And this is the basic, what I consider just the basic simplified form for the questions that was asked to us. Number one was taxation. What happens to my cost? Number two was this statement that kept reoccurring, which I don't understand fully over time, which I'll explain that towards the end, which is the excessive control. The control by the airport board is diminished in some way. The next one is airport is an economic engine, not a revenue generator. Reduces regional nature of the facility by annexation. What advantage is it to me kept coming up. And then, of course, we want to improve collaboration. And for the perception that annexation wasn't doing that was something we wanted to take up and talk about. So then the first thing we addressed was taxation. We began that with identifying several taxation issues, and then we looked at tax policy a little bit, what's legally allowed, and then we started looking at why the reaction was so steered directly to taxation in this issue. It was, the statement kept recurring that the annexation was purely about revenue for the city, which we kept trying to reiterate that that's not the foundation for why the discussion's happening. But what we realized when we got into the taxation of airports, the airport list that you have on this sheet is a list of airports we received from folks at the airport. One of the airport board members gave us this list of airports that they considered, I guess, comparable to ours. Some of those are in cities, some of those are in counties. And the far right column in each one of those spreadsheets is the current tax burden for an airplane in those facilities, right? No. So for each individual city, that is an approximate value of tax burden if you have a plane valued at at those two numbers identified at the top. One is 400,000, the other one is a $4 million plane. So when we evaluate those, we can easily see and we acknowledge that we underestimated the assault that we would consider cities and communities place on airplanes as a revenue item, which is totally reasonable then, therefore why the users of the airport and those that owned jets took the position that it was a revenue grab by the city. So for example, we will look at Bowling Green, or not Bowling Green, that's not a great example. London, for example. London and Laurel County, the tax system over on the right-hand side, if you're a large commercial plane valued at $4 million, the owner of that plane, corporate or private, in London will pay total tax burden to the community of $34,162. The burden in Frankfurt is $52,000 approximately. The burden in Bardstown is about $38,000. Somerset, the burden is about $36,000. Currently, the tax burden in Boyle County and Danville at the airport is $12,500. So it became very obvious very quickly that the concern is that the city was going to cause a significant increase by annexation to that number. Even though we were discussing the airport not as a revenue-generating annexation, but as a business development incentivizing annexation, which has happened before here too. So
Is this essentially like just for clarity, property tax that the owners of the planes?
property tax, that's a good question. So for example, in Boyle County right now, there's on that $4 million column over on the right, there's fire and special districts that exist. In Boyle County, it's a fire district. You pay 0.1 per hundred for a property tax towards the fire district for an airplane in Boyle County. So that is the existing tax structure for our system. The small plane on the left is a $400,000 plane, which is your entry level, what I would consider your entry-level business plane. There's people and enterprises that have planes valued at less than that. That's kind of what I would consider an average number, right? Now, we can debate that number, we can dial that in, and we can delineate that in many different ways to see what the impact is. If it is at 200,000, we took care at 400 and 4 million, and then 65,000, which is not on the screen, it's on a different screen, strictly because so that we could get to an average insurance plan too. So the insurance premium tax was discussed, and that is a tax that would be added to planes if it is in the city. And so we wanted to get to an average plane so that we could establish an average insurance premium too, so that we could assess that tax properly. So then, when we looked at that, it is again, to make a very clear statement, it is very clear the concern for the aircraft community, what their fear was for taxation if it were annexed by the city, as evidenced by actions in other communities throughout Kentucky, not just around us, that you can see that's a very diverse set of communities. And the tax burden on airplanes is very high. And we would honestly consider that probably disproportionately high considering the actual impact for a plane. So then the next thing we did was we overlaid what tax policy we proposed to those costs. And what we did was we compared that to these other communities, which is at the bottom of the screen. And when you assess the rates, there are a few communities that are strategically trying to incentivize aircraft on the airport property, and that is identified in the table below. In Bowling Green has a 0% property tax on aircraft. Louisville has a 0% property tax on aircraft. Jefferson County has a 0% property tax on aircraft. Warren County has a 0% property tax on aircraft. When we go on down, the Lexington, for example, it has tax both on insurance premium, property for the aircraft in the city, property by the county. So it's very obvious, the communities in our minds that are using those, that is an economic incentive. For example, UPS is in Louisville. So they're trying to incentivize and promote the existence of UPS as a business, and other on-air users, obviously, but it's easy for me to point to UPS in that their hub is in Louisville. So our proposal was first to compare what other cities did, and then which gave us confidence in that the correct thing to do was to propose a property tax rate on air of $0, and then address our insurance premium tax specific for the category that airplanes are taxed in. And so if we are going to take the position that we want to incentivize air in Danville and Boyle County, then we should set that insurance premium tax rate for that category lower than the other airports in question. And so the average of Louisville and Lexington was 5, so we projected 0.04 to see what that would look like. And then the other thing is the on-air employee occupational tax. And so we didn't really know how to handle that, and there's 2 reasons, and we are open to really good suggestions beyond what we are suggesting on the screen. And I labored over what to do there until a couple hours ago. And really, I think I arrived at that recommendation, which is to consider dedicating the occupational tax. There's currently 6 employees on air, which is about $5,000 a year, plus or minus total, if it's in the city, that you would receive in terms of occupational tax revenue as an annual commitment back to the airport, long-term, and in addition to the other normal annual contributions that the city makes. So then automatically provide any occupational tax revenue received from on-air employees to the airport board directly as a revenue stream for operations for them. Now, the airport board then can redistribute that to the employees or do what they see fit with it. But that is a long-term thing that can be done. If you try to incentivize on-air employment, that through some sort of economic package, you're going to daylight that. It's going to last 5 or 10 years, and it's going to be gone. This approach is a permanent approach, and the recommendation from one of the corporate entities that I talked to indicated that they would just prefer that be a permanent revenue stream as occupational tax back to the airport board, and let the airport board decide what to do with that bit of money. Hope that makes sense. So then that was the structure we had, and so what does that look like when it's overlaid into the chart that I had on the previous slide, keeping in mind that the current tax burden for a $4 million plane was $12,500 and a $400,000 plane was $1,257. After we apply those, here is the average net change for those, and actually included the $65,000 plane here. So starting at that plane, the current tax burden is about $205. The future tax burden in the city would be about $240. And so you would have a net change of about $35 against the average of those 20 airports of about $595. So it's well under the market, well under the average for those airports. The variation on the $65,000 plane is the liability insurance. It depends on who's flying the plane. So the range for the insurance was very high there. And so as it was communicated to me, at the $65,000 level, this probably was a wash for an owner. It probably wouldn't be up or down $35. It would probably be a wash considering each individual customized value of their plane versus their property tax. I don't know how I can delineate that down per plane, but again, all we can really do at this point is just look at that average plane and talk to the insurance company about what that looks like. The $400,000 plane, the current tax burden out of the city is about $1,257. In city, it would be about $1,197. It would reduce the tax burden by about $60, and it would remain well under the market for that plane at general aviation airports, particularly the 20 listed that was given to me. So then at the $4 million plane level, the current tax burden is $12,572. Once it is annexed with the incentivizing tax policy, the total tax burden would go down $3,000 to $9,500. So what does that look like in the market? Is we actually then would be the third cheapest by tax burden airport to be on. That's not considering fuel costs, that's not considering rent for hangars and things like that. Strictly tax burden, right? So we drive down our tax burden on the commercial users about 20%, 25%, based on their insurance premium rate. And as you can see, the average of the cities that are on the list or airports that are on the list, the tax burden's about $32,000, and we're driving that even lower compared to that average on your larger commercial planes, which are your businesses that you're trying to keep, your large industries such as on our airfield, which is your Lafayette Engineering's, your businesses such as that. For the smaller commercial planes, it's essentially a wash against the market. It is improved over Madison County, but it's essentially the same. So then the other questions that we looked at, the excessive control, the control by the airport board is diminished. There's no legal, the annexation has no legal alteration of anything operationally at the airport. That's just simply a total misunderstanding. But I would say this, no more than that already exists. The board is already an appointed board by the City Commission and the Boyle County Fiscal Court. It is already under the same influence that it would be under in the future. It is an appointed board by the two government agencies, right? That doesn't change. That is not diminished, nor is it increased. The airport is an economic engine, not a revenue generator. I don't have an argument with that at all. I don't have an argument with that statement, and I wouldn't project one. It is important to have a base job creator, such as Meggitt or Lafayette Engineering, than the tax revenue from a single plane. The planes enable those companies to exist in our communities. In my previous life, the company I worked for had the advantage of having airplanes in their fleet. And we traveled daily from different states to different states and made it back to our home office. I understand directly how important it is for air travel in your business. These airplanes then should be respected as such. So the example summary we have is that the overall community economic benefit from, say, 10 commercial planes added as airport users outweigh the tax gain potential from the planes at this level. If you have a $2.5 million impact, that is a total community impact for those 10 planes of $25 million. A few $1,000s by contrast is if the tax rate is double from $10,000 a plane to $20,000 a plane, you're going to pick up $100,000 in new tax revenue on those planes. That does not address, or that pales in comparison to the overall economic impact of having a plane on your airport, right? So the tax policy should reflect that respect, and communities, as evidenced by the tax rates in other communities, that is not incentivized as it should be, in my opinion, which is why we, again, suggested the rates we suggested. Reduces the regional nature of the facility. After a lot of conversations, we can only conclude that it only increases the regional nature of the facilities. Simply put, you're adding a third major entity to the on-air facility. Right now, you have only Boyle County and Lincoln County. You're adding the city of Danville to on-air. And so it only increases it by the very description of it in itself. And then the partnerships between the entities have existed for many, many years. It's easy to point to the utility. The utility project that provided sewer service to the airport was a partnership between Lincoln County, Boyle County, and the city of Danville. And so that the regionalized nature of the utility has existed in that area for years. and will only continue because that's the nature of that service that the taxpayers need. And so this doesn't diminish that. It doesn't alter those relationships at all.
And that you referenced, if I'm correct, is what allowed for the new FBO building.
It was a big piece of that. That is correct.
Okay.
Right. Then the question is, what advantage is it to me? Simply put, it decreases the commercial tax obligation or it neutralizes the other tax while it improves services and opportunity. A simple way to describe that too is that the airport is already a function of the government. It is a government board created by the city and county, right? It is, this annexation improves the services to the users of that public facility, right? Through improved fire protection over time or a decrease in taxes, right? And then also the last thing is the goal for the city being there is simply to improve also collaboration rather than oppose collaboration. It improves collaboration and the potential for that between the city and the other agencies that are involved at the airport. If you are nowhere near the airport with your city boundary, it is less efficient for the city to participate in a collaborative way at that facility. By it being in the city, it is more efficient for the city to participate in operation, not in operation, but in the development of features at the airport or the development of needs of the airport board over the course of time. So that's it in a nutshell. And that's the basis for the information we could find is really boils down into these two tables or this chart. And that's all taxes. It's based on this policy. And we would ask, as the commission considers annexation, to pass these in an ordinance solidifying what these rates are before the annexation is finalized.
Commission comments.
I just want to say thanks for the presentation, but before I have any comments, I want to hear from those who are desiring to approach the microphone and talk to us.
That's fine. Any other commission comments? I'll add
I'll wait.
one, and that is, what you have presented is the facts for today and the proposed facts for tomorrow, correct?
Yes, sir.
But what is not included in here is the big vision. The big vision of what this could develop into. And that's really how all this discussion is starting. So I just want to make that point because to me, that's the big carrot out there. But it's certainly not about taxation. If there's no further comments, then, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is yours. Would ask that you go to the podium, microphone, introduce yourself.
3 minutes or less. Mike? 3 minutes or less.
What's our policy on that as far as a workshop?
Mayor, it can be what you desire it to be today.
Well, then all I'll ask is that, let's not be repetitive, if that's okay. Sir?
Okay, I like not being repetitive.
No, that wasn't directed to you being repetitive, but 2 or 3 people saying the same thing.
Yeah, I like that too. First, I want to thank you all for giving us the opportunity. And we'd voiced that interest. You heard us. We're here. So thank you very much. And then secondly, I know Earl's presented a lot today, and there's been a lot of discussion relative to annexation. I'd just like to ask of the commissioners, what questions do you have now relative to annexation for the airport board, if any? I'll start with Mr. Cobb.
For the airport board, I guess, what is the board's vision? You take whatever happens here out of it, just you guys, where do you see yourself going, expanding, building,
Okay, so short-term, and when I say short-term, I would say in less than 5 years. What we have at play is Air Evac, which is a regional maintenance facility in addition to the life-saving helicopter facility that's been there. They're switching the type of airplanes from the two-bladed helicopters to a four-bladed helicopter, which means they need more space. And right now, they're storing $80,000 new helicopter rotor blades outside, and so they are pressed for space. In addition to that, their company is identified, and we have identified, and we've obviously been able to control this risk. But in order for a FedEx truck to be able to deliver to the airport every day, they have to drive out on an active air ramp, and we all know there's risk there. And all of this led to the need to provide them with another facility. And thanks to the state of Kentucky, which is going to co-venture an expansion with us, we are in the architectural schematic stage of coming up with a design and a price to get an agreement with Air Evac to build a new facility at the end of Pleasant Drive. The FAA has in their 6-year plan to add a ramp out in front of that, which will also be large enough to add a second building so that we can attract more corporate aircraft or the expansion of existing services. That's the most immediate need that's being addressed. But what's big about that is that we've got a flight school, the Wings Flight School, that is on the airfield that's expanding at a rapid pace. I think they have more than 11 aircraft, and now they are maintaining those aircraft on the airfield. But in addition to that, they have started providing maintenance services to other aircraft that are not part of their flight school, and that's fairly common with flight schools. In order to kind of, to reduce that overhead of maintenance, to have your own maintenance shop, and be able to fill in with work that you solicit from the public, and they have needs, and at the moment they're hoping that they will occupy the building that Air Evac would move out of, and as part of that chess game. And then, as you all are probably aware of, I know that Mayor's been involved trying to help us, even with Stewart, trying to get EKU on the field, evolved into trying to locate an aviation maintenance technician school. UPS funded a study, and I know Bill Hammond, our local aviation business there with Hammond Aviation, he and Jake Bell went to UPS and right just pre-COVID, to look at the needs, and that in 10 years there's going to be a 700,000 person shortage of pilots and the same number in mechanics. And in Bardstown, the folks over there have gotten one of the members of the community to donate an airplane that the 3 schools over there, the city, county, and Catholic school, have just built and sold an aircraft that these high school kids that are participating in the program participated on, and the time that they spent building that aircraft goes toward their aviation maintenance technician license. And all of those things we would like to do, and due to the generosity of Patty Powell, we see that as a reality once we can get these first 2 steps in our vision behind us in the chess game, so to speak, and that's to build the Powell building. And the Powell building would be a hangar that would have, talking to Bill Hammond, he's stated that the ideal build room for building an airplane with a high school club is an 18 by 36 with a garage door that opens out into the hangar for the final assembly of the airplane. But this would be a building that, as you walk in the front door, it would have a common area, it would have a galley, it would have a conference room, it would have a build room, it would have some hangar space, and then some small classroom space. And we would consider this really, in a lot of ways, an incubator space, because you're using it as an opportunity. There is I know Jamie Payton and Jake Bell worked hard, and Boyle County now has an aviation maintenance program in their high school. So we're not like Bardstown yet. Danville tried to get it going. COVID, I think, was tough on Danville last year, and so they were unable, but I think it is going this year. And then Lincoln County is going to take one on. And so, you know, it's our hope that we'll get the same program going here for the high schools. But to use this building to attract new talent to aviation and for the community to know that aviation is not just about being pilots. You know, it's about being a maintenance technician. It's working in the aviation business. I mean, we've got our manager, Christian Barker, and his brother that are both managers of the airfield, providing us with knock-your-socks-off customer service. And so there's a lot to be learned about the aviation, whether it's general aviation or at a controlled airfield. And so we see Danville as being a really good spot for that and would like to get this PAL building up. And to that, I'd like to explain it a little bit deeper in that right now we have an aviation maintenance technician school in Somerset. It is accredited for 150 students, but they only average 50 students. The one in Louisville, where the population's much larger, has a 3-year waiting list. And because of this, and because of the nature of apprenticeship and getting someone a technical degree, is you want them to be able to learn, and it's what the community college system does, is you want them to be able to either live at home or live where they're currently living, have a part-time job, and get an education so that they can get a better job without having, you know, to sacrifice going into debt. And we've been talking to the Division of Aeronautics, and we sort of see trying to get these schools an hour apart, Somerset to Danville, Danville to Bardstown, Bardstown to Louisville. Talking about doing one in either Mount Sterling or Moorhead, one doing one in Big Sandy. And so I think you may have seen in the news the other day where the governor has combined education and workforce development. I don't know if you picked up on that, but there is currently, I've attended one Teams meeting related to that and with the aviation business. And I know in the Cincinnati airport's pretty lucky in that being in northern Kentucky, because there is an aviation maintenance technician school in Cincinnati, and so they're picking up lots of people that are working out at DHL and at the Cincinnati airport from that school that are local folks. And so that segment's taken care of. We've got Somerset and Louisville, but we think by adding these other points across the state, Danville being one of them, that we can become a more active player in providing a feeder for workforce development. And so we see that as part of our vision and are actively working on that. And
Given that, and that's a great list of things
Well, I'm not
that I hope
done.
we get done. Well, but I wanted to get this out before I forgot, because that's,
Yeah.
you know, I'm old and I forget stuff. But how do you, could the city help you reach these goals? Would it be helpful if the city were more involved? I'm trying to figure out, were you going to take all these on your, just you, the board, and whatever money that you get from the
And-
governmental agencies, or?
yes, and did you all receive the document that I provided Earl to distribute that shows the funding we've received for the last 10 years? Was that, Earl was going to distribute that? No, but let me just read through some numbers for you. And so I was thinking that might have happened since you asked that question. So in the last 10 years, we have received from the state of Kentucky $6.9 million. From the federal government, $2.258 million. From Boyle County, $201,000. And from the city of Danville, $194,000. So when you ask me, could you provide more money? Yes, you can. I know in Washington County, is the Lebanon Springfield Airport. And somehow they managed to get on the tax roll because from the city of Lebanon, Springfield, and the two counties, they get over, I'm sorry, David Coel he's the numbers man for our board, but at any rate, I'm going to round them off. Around $250,000 a year from those 4 entities. And so when you ask, could we do more with more money? Yes, we could, because we could move a lot more rapidly with our vision. And because in addition to the school, and so I'll quickly try to sum up, is that we have on our airport layout plan room for 2 more 10-unit T-hangars. And 1 more I know we could fill immediately. We have a waiting list of 20 airplanes, but the real number's somewhere above 10. And I know that if we had a large structure to house the corporate jets, that we could probably pull in a couple of more of those pretty easily. So if you got a couple $1 million, I tell you, we could put it to work tomorrow. And as Stuart said, we don't ask for money that we don't need, and when we get it, we're going to put it to good use. So yes, we could use more money. But I do want to enlighten you all, because I saw on Earl's bullet point the 3rd major entity that you all are proposing to add, called the City of Danville. I think that was added in 1939, and it's called the Danville-Boyle County Airport, and every grant we receive has to be signed by the city mayor and the city attorney, if I'm not mistaken. And so we really appreciate there being that 3rd major entity, and would like to make a point that that's been kind of the head scratcher in all this, is that the city is already a partner at the airport. And so, did that answer your question?
Yes, sir, thank you.
I could go on with our future plans if you'd like to hear about them, but the point is, we do have a plan, and we are very much interested in seeing things develop around the airport.
So my question is probably more to Earl, but I want you all to hear the answer. I cannot imagine that any of these expansion projects would not be eligible for some type of incentive, possibly grants.
We would have to look at each one of them individually. It depends. You mentions collaboration with the schools. When you're talking about getting the schools in there, I mean, there's always an opportunity for different resources to be brought to bear from different agencies that are involved.
And so this has never been about taxing airplanes. This has always been about economic development. The city has a pipeline that we would like to open for you all and know that the other partners do not have. And it is for economic development, expansion, growth, through incentives, partnerships, including the new EDA that we are in the process of forming, partnering with the schools, those types of things. So I guess my question is, are you all open to that?
Open to more money?
Yes.
Yes.
Or a pipeline to more money?
And a pipeline to more money. And once again, I do know, I have learned through this, and I assume I'm speaking for the board, but there are buckets that would be available to you that are not available if we're not within the city.
Right.
But there's a lot of buckets out there. And some of them are real, and some of them are hypothetical. And so as you talk about funding, I think one of the huge events that took place a couple of years ago, and I really got to give the mayor and the judge credit for this, is that they were willing to and pushed to get some involvement from Lincoln County. And we now have Doug Gooch and Shay Pennegraph on our board, and at, once again, another meeting that was put together with EKU by the mayor, You know, from that, we met, I'm thinking, was David Mead there that day? Yeah, and so have met some of those folks from Lincoln County. And as Doug Gooch told me a year before he was appointed to the board, he was talking to his industrial authority about opportunities for Lincoln County, and he said, hey, guys, I don't know if you all know it or not, but we have an airport in Lincoln County. And they do. You know, this airport is also in Lincoln County. And their commitment, when you talk about buckets of money, you know, from the Lincoln County portion, and they're just getting wound up as far as what they can do to develop in their part of the airport. And so, you know, we have Danville, we have Boyle County that have been involved since 1939, and we appreciate everything you do and look forward to partnering with you in whatever way we do going forward. But now we have Lincoln County that has added their interest, and I know they work with the Bluegrass Ad and with George Lamont, and they're already talking about doing things over there, and have identified space, you know, that they can add these businesses, and so I think there is a lot potentially at play. And so, did that answer your question as far as the buckets? And so, do we want money? Obviously, we live on.
And
We
it's not
live on
just a-
government entities giving us money.
It's not just about money, it's about, you know, opportunities, but money brings opportunities and vice versa. And, you know, but the thing that I want to make clear here is we have access to helping the airport grow and develop, which in turn helps the community grow and develop. And that's why we're here, is for the community. But we can't help the airport with these projects, or we can't offer you this pipeline if you're not in the city limits.
None at all.
And that's been the whole point all along.
Yeah, could you be more specific?
What do you mean?
What pipeline? You know, I mean, this all sounds grand, but.
Economic development, we have access to incentives and you know, possibly grants and things like that we can help to grow and expand the airport and the land around it.
And which of those grants would you not have access to now as a current sponsor of the airport?
We are a sponsor, but the airport is not in the city limits. So yes, that does limit us. Unless you are in the city limits, yes, it does limit our ability to offer these things.
Okay.
Is that a correct statement?
That is correct, Samantha. For example, being in the city opens it up to, you know, and the easy things to point to are the obvious things, like, for example, fire protection. So if we are eligible for grants for fire protection equipment that the counties are not. And, you know, again, if it's in the city, then the city has different pots of money that it receives as revenue that it could use towards infrastructure on air then, that it can't use now. So if you invest, yes, the city can invest dollars now, but it is in conflict with property tax dollars that are in the city now. That not being in the city, you're using property tax dollars in the city to develop there, whereas if it's in the city, then you could use your municipal aid fund to develop roadway infrastructure, for example, that is adjacent to state right-of-way there. So it's how we are, it's within our own system also, the money we can use.
And we
Right.
do it with industry and other businesses all the time, as we, you know,
Well, and to be,
they commit to an expansion or to come here, and we help work with them on tax incentive programs. But they have to be in the city limits
right,
before we
so,
can do
so
that.
to be specific, to be concrete about it, the slide that Earl titled Tax Policy Incentive Airplanes to the Danville Facility, there are 4 bullet points there. One that mentions the tax rate, insurance tax premium, occupational tax rates. There you go, thank you. On that screen, those abatements or reductions can only be provided to entities legally within the municipal boundary of the city of Danville. So not only to the airport as an entity itself, but any ancillary business that may be recruited to provide additional services or be recruited to the local economy could receive those same benefits, meaning property tax abatement, insurance premium tax abatement, or the occupational wage assessment relief.
But if we were not in the city,
You
there would
cannot.
not be a city insurance tax, would there not?
No, there would not. But if an ancillary business were, so those numbers apply to those that are located on the airport as they exist today. Where the conversation should also consider is businesses that may be recruited to come and that may fall within what would be a city boundary or not a city boundary. And in those particular instances, then there is county wage assessment tax. The city can't participate in any abatement of those. And you're right, insurance premium tax would not be presented, but there are fire protection district taxes that are paid now that go to the fire protection district that would be lowered, not only for those that the airport now exists, but any ancillary business that could be derived in the future from it.
Okay, thank you. But one thing, go ahead.
And like the mayor said, this is big picture stuff. Can I sit here and give you specific money that we can get? No.
Well,
But I can tell you that if the airport is not in the city limits, then yeah, there's some stuff that we cannot help you with.
Okay, and I can appreciate that. We have lots of big picture wants too. I know when Mr. Guthrie was in town, Kylie, she used to be Kylie Fouché, I can't remember her last name now, but she's married now, but we were talking, and do you know that the Danville-Bull County Airport has never received discretionary funding from the FAA? And the state receives about the same amount in what they call AIP funds each year as they do discretionary, and it's $150,000 per airport, and there's, say, 50 general aviation airports. You know, we're talking pretty big money, and we've never gotten a penny of that. And so...
Why is that?
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Why is that?
And so, yeah, so why is that? They didn't have an answer, but it's on their radar now. And so, yeah, that's what they said. And so, but big picture, I know, tell me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mayor, you called me on January the 4th or 5th to talk about this big money. And you were talking about the importance of doing it quickly to get in because of your connections with Elaine Chao and Mitch McConnell.
Was that of 2021, or was that of 2020 or 2019?
In 21, January 4th or 5th. And so, that's what I'm saying is that I understand you can, big vision, but it's nailing down those dollars. You know, that's the one
Right.
thing and I think, you know, one of the messages that I do want to get across today is that I think that if you knew more about what's been going on at the airport, it's just amazing the monies that Stuart Powell has reeled in over the years. Mm-hmm. He had a relationship with all these people, although I will say, he did not get discretionary funds. But at any rate, that's another bucket. But
And so to use your terms, the purpose is we can help you stay on people's radar and get on people's radars,
okay.
but not unless you're in the city limits.
Okay. But you have been since 1939. I'm still just trying to, you know, and so it just sounds like a contingency of the relationship that if we're not in the city, that the relationship's not going to be what it has been up to today.
No, that's not at all. What I'm trying to say is there are more things available if the airport is in the city limits.
Okay.
It's opening a pipeline.
Okay, sure. All right, thank you. Any other questions, Commissioner Terry?
I don't think so right now.
Ms. Holland?
I was supposed to be in Florida, and after waiting 3 long months to hear from the airport board, I moved it to tomorrow.
Thank you.
So I appreciate everybody that's here. It's been tough, I guess, as a city commission member, and also probably frustrating for the board, just the legal process. And it was good to learn about that, to not be able to listen to people, to not be able to talk to people, to not be able to talk to the airport board for 3 months. So I'm glad that we can do that now as this legal process is unfolded. And I appreciate everybody being here. I really enjoyed Earl's presentation. And did that answer your questions or sufficiently? Was the main concern taxation?
Relative to taxation, there is clarity.
Okay. Did you receive a copy of these at this point? Or these just up here?
We will publish those to
Okay.
them, yeah.
And
After this meeting, we will make those available, yeah.
And he's talked to me and he's talked to Patty. He's, so I've seen almost the latest iteration and we talked about it.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sad she's not here, but
Yeah.
I know she couldn't probably be too, so.
She is actually.
Oh, is she?
She's watching
back.
online and I'm getting texts as we go. So, when you have a pal on the board, you really appreciate it because she loves that airport just like her dad did. And we're very fortunate to have her involved, even with her in Florida and communicating via.
Do you think the city's contribution to the sewer out there was big?
So that's a question I don't know.
Because
That I-
that was a huge investment, I know.
Yeah, so that said, Earl was saying that and I'm looking back because this was before Rob, the FBO that the state of Kentucky gave us with the bond for 10 years for the, was that contingent on us? That Earl, tell me if I said this correctly, that Stewart needed some commitment from the city to receive that bond.
I know, I don't know to receive it. I remember at the time it being used to free up the progress for the building at the time. And I can't remember the details. It's been 10, 15 years, but, yeah. Yeah.
I think the city and county had to offer fallback insurance, and then the airport board had to do it. Luckily, none of that was required, but that there was some obligation if the state defaulted on payments that the city and county were obligated as well as the airport.
Yeah, and I remember particularly what one of the ancillary goals of that infrastructure development is to make sure that the empty field to the north of the building there between the roadway and the main facilities we had sewer access. I remember we focused a lot on some of those details to make sure that the opportunities at the facility could all progress with sewer, public sewer, which would enable full, dense development of the property north of there. And I know that there's not been anything with it necessarily, but I know other than a lot of ideas, a lot of healthy ideas that the airport board, I'm sure, has talked about over the years.
So to be clear, what Marshall's saying, and it is that I think you may have understood that Stewart needed commitment on that sewer to build that FBO. That is not true.
Yeah.
What the airport needed was the county and the city to understand that if the state was unable to meet the obligation with U.S. Bank, that the city and the county would step in. And so, did I quote you correctly? That's not to say that we don't appreciate that it was pretty handy that low area went right through the airport where you could put the
Correct.
pumping
That was a
station.
mutual, there was no doubt that And I'm not necessarily trying to oversell that. I'm just stating, what I just remember about
Right.
the era that, as it played out.
Okay, but as it was mentioned, I think that was not totally correct.
Okay, thank you. I guess my last question would be, would annexation affect the partnership, Lincoln, Boyle, Danville, your ability to get federal or state funding at all?
Well,
Right. So it won't affect your ability to get, where the property line is, won't affect your ability to get funding?
no, I think our federal funds, the
Okay.
AIP funds that we get, aircraft, airport improvement, whatever funds, but at any rate, that we get each year, I don't think that would change. So I don't, one way or the other. As far as the city and the county services, I know currently the county helps us with snow removal, which is huge. I know Mr. Robbins is here, and when his airplane's stuck, he can't conduct business. And so snow removal is huge, and since there are several county members here, we want to thank you all for helping us get that runway cleaned as soon as possible. But bear in mind, the service that we provide at a GA airport is completely different from the services Lexington and Louisville provide, in that plowing snow is just one aspect of snow removal on a commercial airport to keep it open. They have plows, they have enormous broom trucks that are 36 feet wide that as soon as it starts snowing, they send a fleet of them down the runway, and in 10 minutes they brush the snow off the runway. They have millions of dollars of chemicals that are not corrosive to aircraft that they're applying to the runways and ramps. And so, one of the, and I'm trying to make this point because whether we are or not annexed, understanding the relationship, the type of airport you have, which is a general aviation airport, we have to offset that lack of commitment in the way of snow removal, to overcome the inconvenience and the loss of business. Sometimes when they know snow's coming, they'll move the airplane to Lexington where they know the runways will be clean until they can come back to Danville. Unfortunately, they love Danville as much as we do, and so they're willing to do that and bring it back to Danville. But that said, with annexation, I know there's been some question with the county as to whether you would continue to be able to provide that service if we were annexed. And I know that, as Earl has stated, you're not in the position to take on snow removal on the runway.
I don't have a formal opinion of that. My question was not whether or not the city could do it. I just don't understand why the county would not, if that's what they currently do. We're not removing the airport from the county. We're not removing revenue from the county. None of that's changing, and it's seen as a collaborative move. And so I've not taken up that discussion with Judge Hunt or anyone fully, because I, quite frankly, haven't been asked to do that by the county. And so we'll, if that's what they want to talk about, we're welcome to. But again, I don't know, the city, I would ask this question rhetorically. The city is, through the annexation, is being put in a position that they can expand resources and services to the airport, like 24-hour fire protection. That doesn't exist at the facilities now. And so we would have that because we're a full-time fire department. And so you're talking about expanding those resources. And so I don't know why one of your other two partners would consider decreasing resources to the airport necessarily. I don't see that as an economic benefit to the community. But I'm not them, and I'm not trying to speak for them. That's just a rhetorical question.
Okay, Commissioner Holland, any more questions?
I guess I just wanted to confirm with Earl, we can't spend money outside the city limits. That's what I'm hearing.
It is more difficult to
Okay.
spend money outside of the city limits. It is,
It's not about spending money, it's about,
it's not just about,
Right.
it's about improving services also.
it's about funding.
And it's
but-
about how the pools of money internally that we have available to spend too also.
Okay, thanks.
Although you have spent $194,500 as of a couple of months ago at the airport, which we really appreciate.
Well,
Yeah.
isn't that under an interlocal agreement or?
Well, that's
something?
exclusive too of other services that we were down there a lot with Stuart back in the day, but the Secretary of Sewer Service, that was a mutual benefit. That was a significant investment, and Lincoln County invested, more than $400,000 in that with us through the ARC money, and the Boyle County Fiscal Court put in a CDBG grant towards that endeavor, and the city of Danville was able to use the municipal utility to expand future potential of the airport through the sewer. So there's other ancillary investments that doesn't show up. That is the annual contribution made through the city's operation, or I guess the annual contribution to the airport's operations is what that number reflects. But there's other, the county, for example, if the county's providing snow removal, that number's not reflected on that sheet either. And so I would suggest that there's other local public investment than just pure cash. That's pure cash. And so we don't want to fail to acknowledge that. There's other in-kind contributions and other cash contributions that they're in excess of $194,000, and for the county's benefit, $201,000.
This is not about taking money, this is not about writing a check. This is about access to help facilitate creative funding opportunities, incentive opportunities, partnership opportunities, those types of things. So if I may, this is my burning question. And I didn't phrase it very well a while ago, so let me see if I can rephrase it. I understood that, taxation was the airport board's biggest concern. So now that we've clarified that, what is the biggest hangup from the airport board?
Okay, and I'll get to that. I wanted to make that my closing statement.
Okay.
So if you'll hold that, we have a commissioner that hasn't had an opportunity to
And I
ask
don't want
questions.
to, I don't want to ask you any questions. I would have preferred for you to finish your presentation before we open it up, because that may have taken care of some of the questions. I did want to ask a question, though. Are there other people in the audience who desire to present, to talk to us today? Now, we've had Mr. Coelho up here, and I want to thank you for your presentation, but I wanted to hear from everybody who wanted to speak either for this or against this before we opened up, but that's okay. I'm still looking for that win-win. I'm not going to express an opinion for or against this annexation today. That's not our intent. Our intent today was to come and have as much information shared with us from all corners of the community to look at annexation of the airport, but to look at annexation of all the area that's being considered, not just the airport. So I'm still desiring to hear from other people, if they're present, for or against this whole annexation proposal. I know today's topic was the airport and the airport board, but it also should be a chance for folks who are being annexed that are not connected with the airport and the airport board as well. And then I want to also, before I finish, let you finish your presentation and then hear from others, but I've got this thing what I like to call listening sessions. So before we leave today, I'd like to explain that and see if that's appropriate, if that's possible.
Okay, well, thank you. The reason I've monopolized the mic is just to take care of the number one item on my list, and that was to give the commissioners, which we haven't had an opportunity to talk to, an opportunity to ask us questions.
Sure.
And so I haven't made it all the way through, and I'm to you, and if you have no questions, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'd like for you to, yeah.
Okay, so then I will close so that I can make sure everyone has an opportunity to get up to talk to you guys, is that, as it relates to economic development, when we talk about win-win, I'm personally, and I don't necessarily speak for the whole board, but I'm personally not seeing a material benefit in the way of economic development that cannot already take place. We can always do more. The city can, but back to the things that haven't been quantified. I mean, the city's come out and helped us with their bucket truck to get new lights on the building. So we're already collaborating. And I guess it's each time we've met out at the airport with the tenants, I've ended that, Earl, you can tell me with, and we can do all of that without being annexed. Have I not been saying that?
Yeah, we can't reduce the taxes,
No, I'm just saying, but I'm just saying,
Right,
when
right.
we talk about things that we can do, whether it's put in a charging station, which Earl helped facilitate a call, and Jerry Carter's already been out once and identified, several topics that he wants to talk to us about with the RECC, but at any rate, it's,
Yeah.
So good things can happen. So back to economic development, I just cannot see where there is any advantage to annexation relative to that. And I have, and I'll say to the detriment of my relationship with the other board members, is I've worked really, really hard through this annexation with Earl, trying to figure out how I can turn a lemon into lemonade, and I have not succeeded, with this in my mind, and about, additional potential funding. One of the things that I have learned with this that really hurts me personally is this is all about economic development. And Warrenwood has been wanting to be annexed now for some time, and they feel that they've been held out as a token element to get the prize. And so we've missed 2 to 3 years of potential development out at Warrenwood in the way of alcohol sales. She was talking about wanting to develop some farm to table. And so if it's about economic development, why has Warrenwood not been annexed before now? So if your motives are truly economic development, to me, that's not consistent. And and I mentioned it when I got up and spoke in front of the commission last week, is that to me, through this whole process, trust and collaboration keep coming back up. And the way it was done, to me, does not promote trust and collaboration. You can look at the very, very first time when Commissioner Cottle and Holland voted to proceed with annexation. If you look at the tape, the mayor said the airport is on board. Well, I'm here to tell you that we did not tell him the airport is on board. And so that, you all could deduce from that what you want. And so we've had people approach us that have been approached by city commissioners asking if they would serve on the airport board if they happen to get elected again in another position. And through all of this, these sorts of things take place. And I know, and I mentioned it to Earl last week, my concern about one of the other property owners saying that we had been leaning on them or pressuring them or whatever, when in fact, especially me personally, I live on a farm that's surrounded by economic development. And so I've lived next to the Industrial Foundation my whole life. And so one thing I appreciate in these other property owners is their right to do what they want with their land. And I can tell you, is I've approached any property owners to talk to them, the last thing I've tried to do is be even insistent or not be intimidating. And so just to make sure their voice is heard. And so from all that, there comes all this misconception. And I know when you all weren't allowed to attend, but I know at our element that we held at the airport, the mayor of Junction City got up and said he is not sure where all this came from about that he was going to annex the airport. He said, that's a bus this dog doesn't want to catch. And so that in his tenure, we know there was an attempt years ago, but he has not made a run on the airport and had no intention to do such. And to that end, I think that the relationship with the property owners around the airport, with the airport board, is at an all-time high. And so, and the mayor has commented on that, and he appreciates that. And I think it is important, like I said, back to being a property owner surrounded by industry. And so what's concerned me most about this annexation is I just don't feel comfortable with the relationship changing and annexation happening, because I feel the element of trust, and it's going to take a while to get over that, because of what's come out the way it was presented. And I think as a community, I just don't think it's the model that we want to use. And as a taxpayer in the community, if we're wanting to promote economic development, we need to be working together as a team and all be on the same page before we go public with something. And that's not what happened here. And so I appreciate your time. And the only question I have that Patty sent in is, what about the occupational tax on Wings Flight School, which is fragile at best? And will there be an occupational tax on the Wings Flight School?
When I spoke to one of the airport staff yesterday, we asked them the number of jobs, and we based that number 6 on what comments we got back. As far as we know, there's 1099 employees there. Besides that, I can't answer that specifically for one of those entities, and we can do more research, and if we need to model some incentive to help them, I think Wings Flight School is something that we need to promote over the course of time, and maybe when they expand, maybe if they move or something, there's other opportunities to help them too through incentives. So I can't answer that directly. I was basing it on the comments and information we received.
Because they're working hard. They have a great big vision, but flight schools in general, are not a .com. And so, they're really providing a service to the community and making a living, and that's it. And so, we need to do whatever we can to help them continue training future pilots. Thank you all.
Mr. Mayor?
Thanks, Ron.
Yes,
I
sir.
need 5 before we continue. I've gotten 3 phone calls that look really important.
Let's take 5.
Good. It was nice. Everything went as planned. You guys had a great time. It was in my mailbox. I got great pictures. Good. How are you? 40 degrees on the ocean and there we go. Good to see you. You doing all right? Yeah. She's good. Yeah.
We are ready to proceed further. And I believe we're at the point that we were continuing to welcome input from the public. Marshall?
Can you all hear me now? As you, I think, are probably aware now, my name is Marshall Wilt, longtime member of the Airport Board. I'd like to thank you all for being here and taking your time. I'd like to thank Earl for arranging and doing a lot of work for our meeting here. We finally have an opportunity to talk one-on-one. And I was hoping it would happen much earlier, but it's happening now, and that's a good thing. I'd also say I'm going to make some comments. Our chairman has made some comments about what's gone on and what's at the airport. I'd like to invite all of you, if you're not currently familiar with what's at the airport and what has been done, to please come out and let us guide you through in an informative way to tell you what is there, where the funding came from, why it's there, and how the process works. So it's an open invitation. I hope that you can do it. If you don't all come together, you can do it when it's convenient. We'll make arrangements for you. I see no reason for this prohibition for us being able to talk only to the full commission. So our chairman said something about grants. I'm not going to repeat what he said, but I'm going to add to it. Over the last 12 years, we have gotten grants from government agencies that are just slightly less than $10 million. Of that, 2% came from the city, 2% came from the county, 73% came from the state of Kentucky, and about the remainder came from the FAA. So you can see how we've been able to make capital improvements in the last 12 years. And the pattern stays the same way going back to the 1980s or so. The money that the city and the county have prevented has been essential for us. It carried through our operations when we were struggling to keep the door open. And you've continued to support us, and we appreciate that. The monies have been used in profitable ways. Now, we generate, at the airport, we generate revenue. And net of our costs, we have two sources of revenue generation. One is hangar rental and one is fuel sales. We have some small incidentals, but those are the ways. Of these two, fuel sales is significantly larger than hangar rentals. Now, we have about 50 tenants, and they contribute to this revenue. Of those tenants, 4 that are businesses contribute 60% of that revenue. And so you can see the basis for our worry that increased taxation could cripple our revenue stream and set us back. What Earl has presented here today has addressed that. And I have not had time to assimilate all that you did, but we'll study it carefully when you provide those figures. In my mind, the major reservation I had about annexation revolved around losing tenants, and losing tenants because cost to tenants would go up. And what Earl has tried to do is address this, and I welcome being able to study that, and I appreciate your doing. Now, the way grants for capital improvement at the airport have worked since I've been familiar with the airport goes back to the 1970s, but particularly since the middle 1980s when we built a big new hangar and moved from the west side over to the north side of our airport. This is the way those grants have worked, and they primarily come from the state and the FAA. You can see that from what I've said. We have to demonstrate a need for doing something, and that's primarily we have more customers, we have more tenants, we have a long wait list, we have businesses that want to locate here. And when we do that and we make application, then we have been very successful as anybody in Kentucky for general aviation, for getting these grants. And we know how to do it, we know the process, and we've been successful. And if you accept my invitation to come out, if you've not already been familiar with it, you will see what is there. There have been comments here tonight that annexation and being inside the city limits will open new avenues for development, capital improvement, whatever, to the airport. To me, those remarks have been without supporting detail. There's something new, something that hasn't happened in the airport. And we have asked and asked over and over again, what would examples of these new sources of revenue be? Where would the money come from? What would be the grantor? Who would do it? What types of grants and what types of projects would be made available to us that are not made available to us now? And I still don't know the answer to that question. My image of the way the city is thinking about annexation in terms of economic development comes primarily from my conversations with Earl. Also, some conversations that our chairman has had. And this is my image. It's economic development in undeveloped land between Ghost Pike and 127, between south of Walmart to the airport, in there, in the form of an industrial park. Land which will be developed to welcome new businesses, new industry into our community. We're all for industrial development. We're all for economic development. We've been developing the airport to attract new businesses and new jets and whatever to our community, and that's been our emphasis for the last 25 years. But my image of what you all are talking about leaves a lot of questions about why it's necessary to go this way. The first question that comes to my mind is why change an industrial park from where we have traditionally done it in our community, off Lebanon Road up to Perryville Road and so forth. Why start a second area? I've heard statements that there's great future in aviation. It's going to replace ground transportation and things like that. These just raise questions to me. what we can do at the airport is we can service and we can attract businesses who use aviation in their course of business. They move people in and out of our community. They move materials in and out of our community. And we know how to service those people. And we have businesses that fly 300-400 miles out of their way to stop because we offer better fuel prices and better service, and they like us. But what I do not think we can do is attract in our community cutting-edge Silicon Valley-like industry that's going to build new electric aircraft, it's going to build unimagined new technology. We don't have the intellectual infrastructure in our community to make inroads and to compete there. Also, there are other airports that would compete with us that have longer runways, they have more services or whatever. And to me, these are impediments for attracting cutting-edge developers and businesses at the forefront of electric-powered aircraft, for example, new concepts in aviation. So, why would we need the airport to be within the city limits in order to do economic development here, either in a new industrial park where we're talking about now or enhancing what's already there? There's still land available in the old economic development area. There's a lot of factory buildings and a lot of unused space over there. I'm puzzled by why we would go to a new area. But even giving that, why is it necessary for the airport to be within the city limits in order to, say, support an industrial park that's north of the existing airport road? Why would we need to do that? And I still don't have answers that convince me that what you're going to do is necessarily requires the airport to be within the city limits. So if you have any questions or anything else I could address, I'd be happy to try to respond. Thank you for listening.
Hello, everyone. Jason Cullen. Thank you guys for getting this meeting together. I appreciate it. I agree. I wish it would have been sooner, earlier on in the process. I have a couple questions. My background is in finance, and so I see spreadsheets up here with numbers, and I've tried figuring out where these deductions come from, but I don't see the math. Like, there's nothing up there that showed us where the math was. How do you go from, somebody paying $13,000 right now to their new thing under this annexation would be less?
I'm sure Mr. Coffey will explain that if you ask him.
Yeah, and so the application, for example, the fire protection on the screen there, 0.1, that goes to 0 if it's in the city, for example. So you overlay that against 0 property tax increase, you overlay that against the insurance premium tax at 4%, it results in a net savings, which can't happen if it's not in the city, essentially, because unless the county is willing to forego their property taxes, there's no other real alternative to reduce that tax.
But how's it to get reduced that much without taking portion of the county's tax revenue?
The 0.1% on fire protection goes to 0.
Okay,
That's
that's it. That's how
correct.
you get.
Yes.
Now, maybe you can
So-
get
so
the
when you
county
look at your
to
other
agree
sheet,
to
yeah.
forego their portion of the tax, and then we'll be better.
So when you look at this sheet here, if you look at the existing structure, you have fire protection at $4,000 on the right, for example, for a big plane. That goes to the
Your-
$1,000 column for the property, for the insurance premium tax, and that goes to 0 on fire protection. So that results in a net decrease.
But how if you're charging them 4% tax? Like, so you're adding a 4% tax?
Yeah, on their insurance premium rate, that's based on the average insurance premium rate for that plane.
It's
For that sample
cheaper.
plane as given to us by the company. Rob, the name of that company, South Carolina, I can't think of it right off the top of my head, I've got it written down. But nevertheless, yeah, so we spoke to those folks, and that's based on the insurance premiums that they gave us.
And the extra, I call it extra, the special fire protection that they're paying now goes away.
Goes to 0.
Because
That's correct.
of the insurance.
Because it's in the
premium
city.
tax, which is less than what they've been paying for fire protection.
That is correct, right.
So
So
then,
it's,
so then you'll provide, so will you guys take over that fire station that's right there?
that's up to the county if they want to give that up. I'm not really sure. I could see, but this, the service, the fire protection services on air would be provided by the city then after that, so long as it's in the city limits, which is a 24-hour, it is an improved
they would-
service at a reduced
Okay.
cost to
I don't-
the airport.
I
And
think
two,
Chief
they're-
Sexton would argue that it's an improved service. You guys do a great job, but they do provide 24-hour service. And so I've been out there, I've responded with these guys.
Right.
They provide 24-hour service. So to say that, that's not really fair.
I'm not questioning whether the integrity of their service. I'm simply suggesting that the response time, the insurance service organization rates the Danville Fire
understand.
Department as a better performing fire department than it does volunteer fire departments on average. That's the basis for the comment, right? It's nothing to do with the integrity of the Bull County Fire Department. It has nothing to do with it.
Okay, but it's still a 24-hour service. So.
It's a
if-
volunteer service
if anything,
compared to
it
a
would.
full-time, fully
All right, so-
certified agency.
So, one of the occupational taxes that you said would go back, I guess, in that last bullet point, on-air employees, and if
That's
I-
our recommendation.
And the only thing that struggles with me is that you said, was it yesterday or today you kind of came up with that? There's still so many things that are kind of falling in that have not been solidified. And if I look back at Christian, and Christian's our airport manager for anyone that doesn't know him, so he would have an occupational tax from the city. And then the city would refund the money out of his paycheck back to the airport board. So we're going to reduce his paycheck, and then the idea is to give it, so he gets less money in his paycheck, but then it goes back to the airport board for them to turn around and possibly give it back to him or make improvements? Is that what that is, or?
Right, they pay currently they pay a county wage assessment
they do.
already, right? But that
We're
is
talking about the new stuff that you guys want to do. We're not talking about the stuff that's there
Mm-hmm.
right now. I mean, that's, you know.
Right.
The city is looking to annex, the city is looking to change the game. And so there's 3 partners, and technically 4 partners, and only 1 wants to change, the other 3 do not. So if the city's coming in and wanting to make these changes, I'm just trying to understand how it makes sense to reduce Christian's paycheck, reduce Nick's paycheck, reduce, many of the other people out there, Air Evac, all of these. I'm guessing Air Evac would also, because there's more than 6 employees at Air Evac. There's more than 6 employees at Wings Flight School. So the number could be greater than 6. I'm actually closing it to 15 from my knowledge of spending a good amount of time out at that airport. So the city is willing to, if it's at 12, 15, whatever that number is, you guys will consistently send that money back to the airport board? Is
Well,
that,
one of the things Rob mentioned earlier was the idea that Air Evac is moving locations on the airport anyway. So that
of course,
ultimately is irrelevant because it's going to be on
Over in
the
Lincoln County.
side of the, but notwithstanding, that's the solution we recommended because that gives the freedom of the airport to make the decision
Okay.
with that, what they want. I'm not judging whether or not what decision they'll make. I'm suggesting for the city commission, that's the avenue.
and this is for the current city commission. So there's no, what, and I mean, I know things from the county side, but from the city side, what stops another city commission from coming in? I mean, there's a possibility that only one of you out of 3 may not be on this in a year, commission.
What's
So-
your question?
So my question is, you know, if the next commission comes along and finds out that these numbers aren't working, what's to stop that next commission from coming in and saying, you know what, we can't honor this zero property tax, you know, or this insurance premium? Is that a possibility that those numbers could actually be changed by a future commission?
There's already the possibility that the county could increase the property tax on airplanes now. And so while you're favorable as a magistrate, the same argument you're making for the city commission could be made in the fiscal court. So with all due respect, I think that's a hypothetical, and I don't think anyone's
the
in a
school
position
boards.
to answer that at this time.
And school boards.
And school boards as well. Stewart was very strategic when we look at the other communities. Part of the reason why those numbers are so high is because school boards are heavily, rely heavily on airplanes as revenue, right? And so Stewart was very strategic in getting Bull County Schools to have a zero property tax on airplanes so that any future school board could change that policy as well.
Of course.
Right.
But so now, but what we're doing.
So?
Now, the tenants and the board have to worry about the county and the school. Well, now we're going to throw the city in there as well. And, you know, you've just increased your odds that somebody's going to have to look to say, hey, we could possibly add a little revenue, or this doesn't work out. It didn't add up the way we hoped it would. And now we need to change what we've done. You know, and it kind of, a lot of times governments, you know, counties guilty of this too. Sometimes we ask for forgiveness instead of permission, kind of thing. And so, I mean, that is a worry of the airport and the airport board and the people that are there, is that, you know, this is nice on paper right now. I mean, appreciate, you know, you guys going to the extent, but in a year, this could be changed. And in a year, we could lose, you know, jets at that airport. And then my last thing is, you know, when the airport got together with the property owners and allowed them to come speak, and it's a shame you guys weren't there, but, you know, the biggest thing is that Mr. McCormick does not want his land taken. And I'm a pilot, I know
Nobody's
exactly.
taking his land. Nobody's taking
I
his
don't
land.
think
Let
you're
me be
gonna-
clear about that.
Well, no, I don't think you can make that promise, Mayor. I don't think,
Absolutely, you can make that promise.
there's no way you can do anything with 1-9 without taking Mr. McCormick's hill. So.
We're not taking Mr. McCormick's
Okay.
hill. Nobody's going to do that.
Well,
Now, if Mr. McCormick wants to sell, we'll have that conversation.
but if the city is investing this much time into making it eminent domain,
You're
is a
speculating
terrible
now.
thing.
You're speculating.
You're speculating about the economic development out there. We've yet to hear what
And that's
this-
a good speculation
this
because
big
that's what we do
plan.
as a city. We speculate
Of
on
course.
economic development. That's what fuels everybody.
Gentlemen, was that your last question?
No, well,
We don't need you and the mayor debating the issues during this time.
I'm trying not to.
Yeah, well, ask your questions and then let's move on.
So thank you, Commissioner. The last thing is I don't want to put a lot of money into this whole electric plane issue. We're decades out on electric planes, on them actually being any sort of purpose or revenue generator, or especially in a small town like Danville, in the pilot community. And Mayor, you're a pilot.
And I read the stuff and it's happening.
Well,
It's happening.
not-
It's happening and it's coming.
no, I mean, just because United bought a few planes doesn't mean it's going to come. So anyway, thank you for your time. I appreciate you guys putting this together.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
Anyone
for your
else?
comments.
David? Glad I was able to reappoint you, sir. Without you, they don't know where the checkbook is.
I'm David Coel. I'm with the Airport Board. I guess everybody's getting aggravated. And what I just want to say is I want you to understand why we are. Originally, the mayor and the previous city manager, Ron Scott, came to our meeting. And in that meeting, they told us that the property taxes are easily removed just by taking aircraft off the ordinance. Then they told us that once in the city, that the employees would no longer be subject to county payroll taxes. And we know that that's not correct. So we asked those questions to get the answers. Tonight, we got the answers. Those questions were first asked 2,029 days ago. It's taken that long. That was May 12, 2016. And the city manager was to provide us an outline of the services that we would be getting, which included, in the meeting, police, fire, and snow removal. We never got that document. In April of this year, Mayor Paris and City Manager Earl attended the meeting, and they did say there's nothing they can do about the property taxes at that meeting. It is what it is. And they might be able to provide an incentive for the payroll taxes, and that they can provide police, fire, and snow removal. Well, as you've heard tonight, snow removal is off the table, and we've asked the county, and they're like, city has said nothing to us about this. We don't know. Why would we provide it? So here we are in December. Well, if it snows tomorrow, who are we going to call? Well, right now we're going to call the county because we're not in annexation. We're not yet. And I'll end on a positive note here. So what happened was you had the first reading of Ordinance 1974. And when we got it, and yes, it's a very small matter, but yes, there wasn't, the letters were not mailed out in the appropriate time. They were 2 days late, 2 days. All right. But within that ordinance, it was annexing the entire airport, which most of the airport is in Lincoln County. Now, there's debate on whether or not the city can annex into another county. I think there's 2 cities currently that are in multiple counties, Dawson Springs and Corbin. In the last annexation, Corbin, I think, or it's London now, they've been in court for a long time now. It's a mess. And I really thought it was interesting in watching the night of the second first reading, that it was explained that, well, we made I actually wrote it down. We have amended the boundary slightly. We amended it by taking off 95.6 acres. I thought that was a little misleading. But anyway. So if you can see what we've been told in the questions, why we have these questions, I would have preferred that the city communicated with the airport board, and when it came time to do this, it was consensual annexation. But, we were told the Thursday before you did that first reading that one of the property owners had contacted the city and says, hey, Junction City's going to annex their next meeting. So you had to jump in front. So you had to work all weekend long and get all that done. But the map that came with the letter we got was dated February 2019. So you've been working on it for a long time, but you've not included the airport board. Now, I'm done. Well, I do have one question. So what does the Danville micropolitan area play in this? I know it's on the Develop Danville website. It's used as an economic development tool. And it includes all of Danville and Lincoln County. Boyle County and Lincoln County, I should say. Are they an option
To do what?
for economic development? It's on our economic development team's website is touted.
The micropolitan is it's a way that economics are gathered. They look at kind of the broader picture and call that a micropolitan area.
Right.
That's the only thing I can explain about it.
I don't think I understand your question, but are you asking if that
Well, if you go on the
helps?
Develop Danville website, which is our economic development people,
Right.
that's on there. Hey, we're in this. So it's a federally designated area. So it's got to be probably some money available through that.
I don't think that has anything to do with it, but it's worth investigating.
Yeah.
What I'll leave on is, I know you've done your homework, and I know it's a done deal, and there's nothing we can do. I don't really understand why, looking at the maps, some of the other property, well, I do understand why they weren't included, because you knew they were going to be a no vote. And so you made sure you played the hand that you're going to win. Well, I do have one question. How many resident voters are there in that area?
The county clerk is served with a notice of intent, or not the notice of intention, but in the event that a petition is filed to certify that, we don't calculate it. We don't know how many registered voters are there. I mean, I can speculate, but I don't know, just because if someone owns the property there, that if they actually reside there, or if they're registered to vote in this county, or if they own property anywhere else. So it would be mere speculation on my part, rather, to make a determination on who is a legal voter for the proposed area.
So we don't know. Can you get me the date that you published in the paper to notify the resident voters and the property owners their right to present a petition?
I'm sure we can. The city clerk can do that. We have to keep record of that.
I did not see it in the paper with the
Oh, it was
ordinance.
definitely published, because we had a copy of it. The
Yeah,
date
it
that-
was the November 5th, which was the second publishing, but I didn't see the first one. It was supposed to be
there.
published with the ordinance.
It was.
Okay.
Let me answer some of your questions directly too, just so you understand what my perspective is. So I've been city manager since October of last year, and when the mayor approached me, philosophically for me, I listened to, and this is so everyone understands how I react. I listen to the commissioners and the mayor individually as we go, and I think about what they say. The mayor invited me to go with him to the airport board meeting. And so we went and we talked about annexation. We talked about philosophically what some of those things meant. And no doubt the mayor has a strong history of desiring to be annexed. But then as the annexation discussion came forward for us, I didn't really talk about it again because it wasn't a city commission initiative. They didn't ask me to look at it. And so as the discussion came forward for us as staff, when we had additional consent to annexation form come through, what I did was we started from then and asked the commission, do you all as a board want us to begin this process, right? Which is, there was a need to establish a review of our southern annexation based on requests that we had gotten, which was then multiple. And so then as time then passed, we developed a proposed boundary based on a historical document that the old city manager had developed, which your citing is dated 2019, and that might be accurate. I don't know when, per se, from my perspective. But what we did was we took it in July as that came forward, or in August, whichever date it was, and we asked the commission as a body officially to give us direction on annexation. Do you want us to consider this? And so they authorized that notice of intent. So then that gave me clear direction as city manager to start the conversation with all parties involved. It was not necessarily appropriate for me as city manager to lead an initiative of annexation without authorization from the commission. So once that question came to us, we took pause before we invested everyone's time to verify with the city commission that this is something you want to consider. And once the commission authorized us to do that, we started working really hard on answering the questions, but more importantly, identifying the questions through discussion with the stakeholders. We made ourselves available at the airport multiple times. We tried to identify what those questions are. We spoke to the property owners in question. We spoke to multiple property owners since yesterday. And we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to do that because they authorized us to go through the process that we are in the provide detail and communicate outward of the impacted parties, and that's ongoing. So that's where we're at right now in the process that the commission authorized whenever they passed the notice of intent. So just understand philosophically for me, that's what authorized us to really talk about it fully.
Well, and I appreciate that,
Right.
but like I said, it started 2,029 days ago, and then we never heard anything back. They want to have a conversation, they're going to get back with us, answer these questions, and we're just now getting the questions answered. That's some of our frustration. As Mr. Powell would say, lack of communication has caused more wars, divorces, killings than anything else. Now, what I'll leave on is I've mentioned it to the city manager and to the mayor. I guess I've been on the airport board, I don't know, 18 years. During that whole time, well, the previous head of the Economic Development Partnership has never been to an airport board meeting. We've always known the airport is an economic engine, and I've always been surprised by that. I've never met the man in a small town. I was astounded by that. So it does, to some degree, hearing economic development in the airport talked in the same sentence for once does sound promising. But, he says, well, if you get us in the city, we got all these pipelines. Again, we don't know what those pipelines are. Another thing Mr. Powell always did, trust but verify. And that's what we try to do. What we feel like is that when we came to the city and says, hey, you know what, if you give us $1 million, we're really going to make that place shine out there. And what are you going to do? You're going to ask me, what are you going to do? But just trust me, don't worry about it. You're going to want some answers before you can make an informed decision. And that's what we have to do. We have to make a decision on what we know. And if we don't know the answers, we can't make a decision. And in this case, we can't do anything about it, though. But I really would have liked to have all those conversations and signed a piece of paper saying, yeah, let's do this. But it wasn't done that way.
Can we talk about the process a little bit? Because obviously, people are feeling a little jilted by the process.
I'm happy to speak to that, and I know the city
What, the
manager.
annexation process?
Process we have followed.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Well,
the
yeah,
annexation process.
okay.
I've been with the city since 2008, and I know that annexation of the airport has been a topic of conversation with every commission that I've advised since that time period, in strategic planning sessions, vision planning sessions, various city managers, various mayors, and a host of commissioners. So it's been a community conversation from elected officials of this body for however many years that's been. I will say I do recall the probably more detailed conversations that Mr. Coyle referenced in possibly 2016 or however many 2,000 some odd days ago, whenever that was. The interesting thing about working with elected bodies as opposed to private corporation is that your instructions for knowing how to proceed vary on every issue. And so your quote-unquote boss is any 3 commissioners on any given day per issue. So while those conversations, I don't I know transpired at that time, and quite frankly, many years before that as well. If it was ever determined in the process by the city manager at that time that there wasn't a potential for consensus either with the Board of Commissioners on how to proceed or with potential consensual annexation, they stopped for whatever reason. And while I'm not privy to those decisions at all times or even how they are made, in this particular instance, I recall being or sitting in on various meetings where it was obvious that consensual annexation was not going to be an option as far as the airport is concerned from initial conversations. And so I think because of that, there was probably, and I'm making some assumption, a lack of follow-up because there wasn't a political will to proceed without consent. At this point in time, the commission, through various other property owners who desired annexation, and annexation is desired for a host of reasons, many of which are never economic generators. Much of what sometimes we annex just for 911 clarification, as we did along 2168 at various interchanges as the road was built and it was confusing. Does the county respond? Does the city respond? So you invest time, money, and energy in a process to simply clarify first response. And that's a public benefit for sure. And we have engaged in non-consensual annexation at various times, and the most recent account was on Stanford Road heading out towards the bypass. And that process was a lengthy one, and I would say a span of years as well, to see if the property owners in question would consent or would not consent. And finally, the same process was done because it is prescribed by law. Without receiving consents, you discuss a notice of intention to annex. If it passes, then you proceed in the manner precisely as we have here. Letters to owners, conversations, public meetings, notices, things of that nature. And I will say I've not been a part of any annexation process that has had this much conversation or an investment by a city manager with potential people that it could affect. Next, I just want to say that annexation is a community issue. It's bigger than just the proposed area to be annexed. The larger question for the commission, as you as elected official, is what is in the best interest of the city of Danville? So upon receipt of requests to be consented from Warren Wood and others, it is incumbent upon those on staff to view, well, what is in the best interest of the city at this time with the parcels that are in fact requesting the annexation. And there was a lot of discussion internally and with the commission about that process. Things that take time, certainly, and I know that is frustrating. And while to Mr. Coel's comment about how we wish that the process could have been decided privately and then announced publicly with open arms and shaking hands, in a private enterprise, that is precisely how we would do it. In a public enterprise, not only are we prevented, have a process that we have to do, we're prevented from doing it precisely in the manner you prescribe. Our rules under the Kentucky Open Meetings Law require any topic of public policy to be discussed in open session, period, end of paragraph. It's over. And while I know that is a source of frustration for many people at certain times, it is what we are charged to do under the law. Not only that, the Kentucky General Assembly has prescribed a process that has to be adhered to strictly, and which is, matter of fact, what the city did here. So ultimately, you're looking at this. You have a public asset at the Danville-Bull County Airport. It is, quote unquote, the people's airport. It's not the airport board's, it's not yours, it's not the county's, and nothing that we do here today or in the future changes that. It is a public asset purchased and operated with federal, state, and local dollars, period. So you are charged, as they are, to determine what operations occur there. You're charged with determining what is the best expense of local taxpayer dollars for the efficient delivery of services. Services include economic development, 911 response, and a host of other issues that we're discussing here today. And while parties, particularly boards, are represented by chairman and, in fact, council at some points, it is a matter of process that you vet communication through either your chair or your council, if you have one. And in this matter, in a small town, that is a blurry line, and it's hard to maintain. But it is inappropriate, unethical, and unlawful for sidebar communications on public policy issues to happen behind closed doors. The Attorney General's clear on it. The General Assembly is even clearer on it, and we have to abide by that process. And while it's not always easy and it's not as comfortable as we could do it if this was a private enterprise, it is what it is. And the public policy is that it's best derived under the sunshine of openness and transparency. So I know in the midst of the frustrations that have occurred here, it's important, I think, to reiterate to the benefit of the public and to the Commission and Airport Board that the process has been precisely as the law prescribed and in accordance with the open meetings law, which were required and, quite frankly, happy to abide by.
Any questions, comments?
Quick comment. I'm speaking for myself, but I'm probably speaking for the rest of the board as well. Mr. Coyle said something about it's a done deal, everybody's already made their mind up. Well, that is not true. That's why I'm here. That's why I wanted to have this meeting. I'm in the information gathering stage, and I will continue to do that to the best of my ability. I have no decision right now, couldn't tell you, but the one I make will be the one that I think is in the best interest of Danville.
Anything else from the public? Yes, sir.
Can I speak just for a minute?
Please.
Commissioners, thank you. I'm Bruce Robbins. A little different from everyone else that spoke. I am a tenant there. I use the plane every week. It's been a tremendous asset to our business. You know, if I could keep things exactly like they are, whether that's annexed or not annexed, I don't want to see a difference. I don't want my costs to go up. I don't want, you know, all the things. I do want the city. I think everybody here wants the city to improve. And if there's opportunities, make it better. But I can tell you that what we have right now is working really good. These guys have done a good job for me. Like I said, I travel out of there every week. Sometimes a lot more than I want to, but it's changed our business. It is a true time machine, as Earl spoke about it, his work in a previous lifetime, having the ability to go to 2-3 cities in the same day just changes business, and it's changed ours, and we've been blessed by that. So I do, from a tenant side, I think that, you know, as you said, do what's the best interest of the community, do what's in the best interest of Danville, but the county too. I live in the county, so you know, my interest is in both. I work here, but you know, I do think that this has to be thought about as a whole. You can't take part without taking the bad part too, the snow removal, you know, repairs and those things. It's got to be looked at as a whole. And, you know, you don't just take the good part of a marriage, you take the whole marriage, you know, and so I think that is one thing I would ask the commission to consider, you know, the taxes. I trust Earl. I'm sure the numbers behind it add up, and he can share those. If my taxes are going to go down, I'm not going to complain, but they're quite a bit less than what I'm doing now. So, you know, I'd like to see the numbers of how those do add up. But I just wanted to say these guys are doing a good job, and I would hope nothing but improvement. But also, as you consider it, consider the whole that you're biting off, that there's not just, putting up a sign or just annexing. There's a lot that goes on, and if the city owns it and it takes away from the county to own it, then you got to step up and own it. Okay, so that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Ownership
There's one good
doesn't-
point there that should be
ownership doesn't
reiterated too,
change.
that annexation has nothing to do with operations or ownership. Title to the property remains the same. Operationally, there would be no difference in how the airport is operated today. The composition of the board remains unchanged. So the questions about snow removal, I understand, those can certainly be discussed. But by mere annexation, we wouldn't consider plowing the driveway at Warrenwood if it's annexed. It's not a part of this conversation. I understand it's a concern, it's been noted, and I think staff can vet that through the city manager and figure out a plan to be a partner in that should annexation take effect. However, it's not a part of annexation, which is just a mere extension of the service boundary of the city, but affects operations zero.
So,
Nor is it eminent domain. I mean, the city has not exerted eminent domain, to my knowledge. I have no knowledge of the city taking exercises to do that.
and
so.
excuse my ignorance,
Yeah.
because I'm not
No, it's-
in the government.
Oh, no, and that's not meant to
We can
be a
change
comment to that.
though,
I think
Bruce.
it's just.
We'll put you up for office.
No.
It's meant as a community comment because I think there is confusion about what annexation is, and it is not eminent domain.
What I don't know,
Yeah.
and I'm referring to, is if the tax dollars I pay today on my asset that's sitting at the airport goes to the county, does it still go to the county and the county cleans the runways? Or does that tax now go to the city and the city is going to take care of that property? How does that work?
You pay the same tax to the county except for the fire protection fee that is on airplanes. You will not pay that 10%, which is in that little under Boyle there on the right side at the bottom, that .1, you will not pay that anymore. The .2143 you still pay. That .2143, a point of that, a chunk of that goes to the fiscal court. That still is true.
So it
That
still goes
doesn't
to the
change,
full
it doesn't go down. The part that is eliminated is the fire protection fee because it's in the city of Danville's fire responsibility then. And so then therefore, we cover that base. Yeah.
Thanks, sir.
Anyone else?
Oh, Jason had his hand up again.
I don't need to get up.
Yes, you do.
But just to understand, these are hypothetical numbers or these actual numbers from the county treasurer? I mean, from the county clerk?
The rates are the comparison based on FY '20 numbers as reported by the Department of Revenue for all counties that we've looked at, all the airports. So the data comes straight off the Department of Revenue's website.
So that .0, that 10%,
That .1 is your fire protection fee.
and
That-
that, I mean,
that every-
the actual money that you say that it's being saved is an actual, in a factual number, or that's what? I guess I'm trying to make sure, are these real numbers, or are these kind of, because you kind of threw 400,000 and 4 million out there or whatever.
Well, those are average planes so that we arrive at some type of some
Okay,
type of
all right.
number. But the rate is a factual rate, right? So if you have a $4 million plane, that, based on .1, that's the tax you would pay, right? So
Depending on what they declare the value of the plane.
Yes.
depending on how the plane is assessed, that's correct.
Correct. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Right.
If I may, I'll wrap up.
Can I have one more question?
Yes,
Oh.
please, go ahead.
Okay. I like open and honest time, and any of you can ask me anything at any time, and I'll give you an answer. Okay? Just to let you know, because we had some discussions about things.
You talking about
And-
any of us?
Yeah, so you could ask me anytime, but with open
for
and
supper
honest
tonight.
time here, my first two votes to annex were based on incorrect information. Not that I'm against it or for it, you know, but, you know, when we can only talk to us five, and you're told certain things, or, you know, the airport's for it, the airport's gonna vote, and not that that was lies, I think people just didn't know, you know? But that's where my request to annex came from, is that information. So I probably would not have gone that way if I had gotten correct information. So I just wanted to be honest about that. But since then, I love Earl's presentation. There's great economic opportunity. You know, we had a great workshop. So there's a lot to think about, and as Kevin said, information to gather. So I'm totally neutral in gathering information and just wanted to be open and honest, that's all.
Thank you.
And I do just want to clarify again, one time for the record on the process, the first vote was to merely have this discussion. It was not a vote to annex or to not annex. It was so this process could transpire. So a vote in affirmance of a notice of intention should not be perceived as a vote in favor or against annexation. So while that is a nuance, it's critical in public dialogue and for you as commissioners to understand the nuance, because regardless of what information it was based upon, your vote to proceed was a vote to have a conversation.
And-
So, go ahead, sir.
Well, I mentioned something about listening sessions, and also I heard an offer for a tour, a more up-to-date tour of the airport. And so I just want to ask some questions about, I've been invited to breakfast at the airport sometime next week. It's at 8 o'clock in the morning, so I'm
Week
probably not
from
going to
today.
make it. But I want to ask the question about, can I take a member of the airport board up on an invitation for a tour? And then I've got down here next steps, and I've got the word beside next step, listening sessions, because people keep complaining to me about the fact that they haven't had a chance to talk to me in support or in opposition of, and I just want to know if that's appropriate at this point for me to conduct some, what I call listening sessions, like meet someone someplace and let them talk to me for 30 minutes to an hour, and I just listen and move on, not force an opinion. So are those appropriate? Can I do that? Is that outside?
For an item that is up for consideration before the city commission, it is, by virtue of that, a public policy discussion.
Okay.
So whether a series of those meetings, whether you are commenting upon them or not, those individuals, as opposed to having private sessions, should appear at a city commission meeting, which is why the notice of intention to annex is published and advertised, to provide precisely what you are requesting. I understand the desire for some people to meet in private. However, it's not appropriate given an ongoing issue in front of the commission that will more than likely happen in a series of what I would say less than quorum meetings and violate open meetings laws. The correct place to do that is in Hear the Public, which we've had people comment on this, and they've had, now more than 70 days to do so publicly for. That's why it's published, and that's why notice is provided, and it's on the agendas as well. So I would say that those private listening sessions are not appropriate.
Okay. Is a tour of the facility that's scheduled, is that appropriate?
I will say it can be appropriate,
Okay.
but it can also be inappropriate,
Okay.
depending on the topic of conversation.
Okay.
So, for instance, at the breakfast that you're referring to, it's completely lawful for you to attend, but you need to know that there will, on however many people attend, may or is likely to have a quorum of you present. If you go there and share eggs and bacon and talk about the weather and things at the airport, that's fine. What is inappropriate is if this conversation comes up at that breakfast. So I would say to you as a charge or an admonishment, depending on the perspective, it is inappropriate to discuss any matter of business before the city commission where there is a quorum of you or potential quorum of you present.
See, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I know better than that. I'm just
Right.
saying as an individual,
Sure.
I'll go back to another controversial issue. I was running for office when we were talking about recycling. Commissioner Carter was on the commission at the time. But I thought people, citizens in this town, smacked me all upside the face about which way I should go for recycling and some other things. So I just have an issue because I've always ran on the platform of being a public servant, and a public servant wants to hear from the public. And is this annexation thing right now, I'm just trying to stay legal. Because you
Right.
know me, I like to talk to people, and I don't want to do anything that's going to violate this process, but it's the holiday season, so I'm a little bit
Right.
cheerful.
And there's nothing wrong with receiving the issue on recycling from private citizens on that matters you're talking about. This issue is complicated because you're dealing with a board-to-board interaction. And you're also, just like the mayor cannot bind a commission without an affirmative vote of at least 3 of you, the same would apply with the airport board. And on an issue that is, while you should not express an opinion where there's a quorum, a potential quorum of you present
Sure.
is the issue. So if you meet somebody on the street and they say, hey, I'm for recycling or not, I mean, there's obviously, there's not a problem with that.
Well, they say, well, because see, I've not talked to folks in the community who are quote unquote not on the board about this issue, because number one, I don't really know face to face who all the board members are. I know them by names, but I don't know them all. So I've sort of shut down all the public as well as the board members about talking about this issue.
You are free to attend, just like you would be any planning and zoning meeting or any other board. But the problem is when you have a quorum of you present,
I understand. Yeah,
and
we'll
there
go.
is an
Yeah.
agenda in
Yeah.
which you will most likely be asked to respond and provide some position, and that is ab initio it violates the rule of law.
In,
It depends upon a quorum or a series of less than quorum meetings when they're likely to occur. Yes. Yes.
Correct.
Does that mean that Commissioner Atkins and I are at this breakfast, and I want him to show him a hanger, I can't do it?
No, it has, no, there's several things present. It's whether you have a quorum present and if public policy is discussed. Showing him a hanger has nothing to do with public policy.
If I want to show him a hanger and describe to him why it was built and how it was financed, is that a violation?
No,
Take me for a free ride too, right?
yeah, that would not be.
I've been trying to do that for how many months, how many weeks?
Good, yeah, I know you can. Well,
The answer has been, I can't do that.
Well,
Telling me I can't do that.
Well, that's not the way the question's been posed to me. The question's been posed that you all desire to have private conversations about annexation with individual board members, have questions asked or answered, and that's inappropriate. The appropriate manner is to do what we did here today, which is what we schedule. It's nothing against the airport board. It's what all boards should operate. When the city commission needs to discuss, name the issue, 911, dogs was been an issue, what do? We have a joint meeting of the court and the commission. You can only communicate so well through your chief elected officers. So while communication can flow from the city manager and mayor to the judge's office, the city commission cannot be and is not responsible for communicating with the magistrates. It's inappropriate. The way communication is vetted is through your chair or your city manager. But there are conversations that need to happen with everyone present, which is precisely what happened here today. There was a voluminous amount of information and time to prepare the document that is before you today by the city manager. That cannot happen overnight. And the delay, while it is just a fact, I mean, you can call it a delay, but it happened at a time we would have liked it to have happened earlier, but there were extenuating circumstances in trying to get insurance tax rates and an answer to a critical question from the Department of Insurance in Frankfurt that delayed it. And so, to this point, boards communicate best in open session where all are present and the information is presented at the first time with all people present. That's not only best policy, but it's in concert with the law as well.
Which in the process that Earl has described in, you know, he couldn't get out in front of the commission without clear instruction. That is precisely how this form of government works.
Yeah.
Mr. Ball, come up front, please.
Glenn Ball, I'm a resident of Danville and also on the airport board. The purpose of the breakfast that Stuart Powell started years ago was an informational session, giving the background, what's been going on at the airport, what's going to happen at the airport. And some of the attendees of those breakfasts were representatives from Kentucky Board of Aeronautics from Frankfort, Kentucky. They was always there. The commission was always there. So that never happened discussing anything. It was always an informational session and also meet and greet and tell them what's going on, what's going to go on. So that's what the purpose of breakfast. So, Mr. Atkins, you can come and have breakfast.
Well,
Which is what I said to
Yeah,
you
yeah,
publicly,
right,
that
yeah,
was
right.
completely allowed. And I said, but what would not be appropriate is if the airport board engaged in discussions about annexation and the commissioner responded. That would be inappropriate.
And let me ask the airport board chairman, or make an offer to the airport board chairman. If our presence being there prevents you from making full comments to everyone there, we're glad to honor that and stay home.
You know, the last thing I want to talk about at the breakfast is annexation.
Okay.
You know, the last thing I really want to talk about ever is annexation. And so, as far as I'm concerned, just to get through this process is all I ever want to talk about, annexation.
Just to make the offer, sir.
Yes, and so if you guys want to come out, because as you can see, you know, our funds come from primarily governmental entities. And those folks, in particular, KDA, Kentucky Department of Aviation, you know, there have been years where there's inches of snow on the road and ice, and you'd think nobody's going to work, and they all band together and come down from Frankfurt to go to that breakfast. That's how much this breakfast means to them. And there's good folks for you guys to come and meet. Our new Commissioner Carter's there, going to be there hopefully, and the folks that, the merit employees that are there, they're all fabulous folks. I mean, if you think about a governmental entity that runs efficiently, look at the Kentucky Department of Aeronautics. When you start counting heads and look at the dollars they manage, they are a role model entity. And so they're great folks, and you should come meet them. And if you bring up annexation, shame on you. So
I think we're like you. We really don't want to talk about it anymore either.
yeah.
Well, and I brought up the breakfast just simply because of the fact that I was going to tell somebody tonight, I've already told somebody tonight, I was not in town available to go. So I was trying to find a way to sort of make a brain check, and I've got my answer. So, but it's important to have this dialogue. So my last comment is this. I would like for staff and the city attorney to talk to us briefly about next steps. Where do we go from tonight? Is there going to be
Well, for me, administratively, I've got a list of people that I've indicated to them, and I've had one of them text me that I would follow up with them as individuals because they've had specific questions. We'll do that. We've talked to quite a few people over the last week. We'll continue to do that on our side, and administratively for us, then the next step with the commission is to bring back the first reading of an ordinance for y'all to consider at some point. That's about it for me. I mean, it's your all's decision on what to do.
So after you pass an intent to annex ordinance, you've had the conversation, the city wanted to delay any further action a potential action on your part until this meeting occurred today. That was the word that was given to the airport board and the public at the onset, and so that word was kept. And the next step is, and the law requires you to make a vote, either affirmative or against. And so I will say, from my perspective, I will, now that this process has been completed, I will prepare an ordinance to annex, and it will be available for your next meeting. And at that meeting, you can either vote in favor of the first reading or against the second reading. And that will happen at the first meeting in December. It will be there for you to deal with as you wish.
Then I guess my next question is that we only have that one meeting in December. Based on how this proceeds, there'll be a need for a second reading.
Potentially. And oftentimes, while we typically cancel the second meeting in December, we also typically have a special called meeting to do kind of end-of-year business items that pop up after the first meeting.
Well, I'm just trying to set the
Sure.
stage for these folks who don't.
Right.
Okay. And then I want to say to Mr. Coffey and to Mr. Dexter, I appreciate the knowledge that I've gained from tonight. It's not about whether I like it or I dislike it. It's just about the fact that it's important knowledge. And to those who have been saying that this is a done deal, I can only speak for one commissioner. I've not formulated an opinion for or against because I didn't have the knowledge that I have tonight. I feel like personally that was the right thing to do. And the other thing I want to share with you all is that there's 5 of us. And I don't know if all 5 of us individually or whatever have talked about this issue. So I couldn't tell you how the other 4 are going to vote. So it's not a done deal. And we have tried our best to represent and respect this community so that we don't operate with things that come before us that as a done deal. We have taken the time to do our homework and wait on staff to give us the right kind of stuff. We just got this today, and we're going to take it and study it and do all the good and bad things with it that we can do, and probably going to ask these guys a lot of other questions. And then on the 13th, we'll cast a vote to proceed with it, with annexation or not to proceed with it. But I've been here for 11 years, and I can't think of an incident where, as a commission, we've come to the table and done anything that was considered to be a done deal. So please don't speak of us in those terms. I respectfully ask that of you all as my community.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I just got a text from Patty. May I ask one last quick question?
Only because it's Patty.
Actually, it was a recommendation, she's been watching this from beginning to end, her recommendation is for you all to consider annexing those that want to be annexed and let the properties that don't not be annexed, is what she.
I'm happy to respond to Ms. Patton. While that sounds like a wonderful, gracious way to proceed, it's not allowed under the law. You have to proceed with the territory that was published in the notice of intention to annex. You cannot increase or decrease the boundary at this point, and you're bound by law to vote on what has been proposed as is in the notice of intention.
But you could say no to the current annexation and proceed with the properties that want to be annexed.
Not entirely, because they're not all contiguous.
Because I know, while we still had council, it was mentioned that it would be possible to do that. And so you might consider that before you.
If those that were willing were contiguous, that could be a potential, which I don't know. I don't recall offhand if they were. I know Warrenwood, for instance, is not contiguous to the city, so it'd have to be a larger area. And I think there is a missing consent of a property owner between that area and Warrenwood, if my memory of the map is correct and consents.
It's my understanding it would be.
What, consensual?
Yeah, that you could get that to happen. And so.
I don't know, because we haven't proceeded under the merit of that argument.
But at any rate, it opened that door. So at any rate, I just heard the attorney say that he could do that if it's consensual.
You could, but at this point, you have to vote on what's before you. Yeah. Correct.
Mr. City Manager, Did the Jarvises approach the city and ask to be annexed?
No.
Okay. All right. Great. If we're done, I'd like to wrap up with some comments, if that's okay. I'm pleased that we've addressed the issue of taxation. I'm pleased that that resolves much of Mr. Wilt's concern and probably Mr. Robbins as well, and others. Let me say to my fellow commissioner, an apology is warranted if I misled you. I certainly didn't mean to, but when you ask, are they on board? I said, yes. What I should have said is, yes, they are aware, because we had been out to talk to the airport board in April. We had been out to talk to the airport board in 2016. This commission is charged with forward-looking. This commission is charged with promoting economic development. That's what we do. And as it has been said, and news to me, and I appreciate Councilor Dexter for sharing, but this has been a topic of the city commission since his time of 2008. The airport is, without a doubt, one of the greatest economic development opportunities within this county. Economic development is our lifeblood, absolutely our lifeblood. And so if I misled you, I apologize. But I also want to say something else that I think is important, because Junction City is on record as wanting to annex the airport. They withdrew their option to do that. Mayor Douglas, thank you, indicated he had no interest. But as Magistrate Cullen has said, I don't believe he's running again. I believe they'll have, potentially, if he's not running, they'll have a new mayor. And that council may have a different opinion. And we want to be in a position to promote the greatest economic development opportunity in this community. That's what we do. Kind of like, who do you want as your partner to further and advance our mutual benefit? The judge and I share a number of passions and loves, but one of them is aviation. And I can say unequivocally, anything that we can do to further aviation in this community, we're committed to do it. And little things like, I say little things, don't mean to make them little things, but things like snow removal, I'm sure we can work those logistics out. But the bigger picture here is the economic development opportunity. One of the things that I've always been stymied by is the fire situation. Now, I have all due respect for the Boyle County Fire Department, but I have rarely ever seen anybody in the building right there next to the airfield. I can also say that while both fire departments are 24 hours, our south station is at least a mile, if not a mile and a quarter closer. And time is everything when you got 100 low lead fuel getting fired up, or just a jet engine. So fire is a concern for all of us, or should be. So what's the best way to mitigate that danger? And I think our ability to address that is pretty obvious. But there's one big question that hasn't been answered here, or hasn't even been asked. And that is, what's the big picture with respect to this Build Back Better 1.25, 1.75 legislation that just got passed, of which $50 billion, that's with a B, is allocated to aviation and infrastructure, of which this is. What are we doing about getting in a position to get our lion's share and then some to get part of that $50 billion. If you want 50 million out of 50 billion, let me tell you, that's 1/10 of 1%. 1/10 of 1%. So when people say we can't get 50 million, yes, you can. But you got to ask. And you have to be prepared to ask. And in order to be prepared to ask, you got to have things like facilities plans and master plans and that kind of thing, which cost money. But I'm sure in a joint capacity, Judge, you and I can talk about it if it's a concern, but I'm sure in a joint capacity, if the airport board needed funds to complete a plan that would give us the ability to sell that further up the line, I'm sure as co-partners in the airport, we would be glad to consider a way to fund that. Now, I have not talked to you about that, and I'm not committing you to that, but I'm sure we'd be willing to have a conversation because I know how you and I work. I hope we have created some clarity. I hope we've created a lot of clarity, frankly, and I hope that through clarity, we can realize how things have evolved to this point, much of it by necessity. We are all on the same page. We're all in the same boat. We all got the same oar. We're all trying to get to the same place. That's it, pure and simple. This commission, this city has no alternative motive here. We all just want the same thing, and that is to take the largest single economic development possibility in this county and make it the best it's going to be. Last thing I'll say, and it's interesting that previous EDP folks did not address the airport. That's unfortunate. But we're on the cusp of a whole new organization that's very, very much aware of this airport and what it could mean to us. Lastly, on a personal note, you all know that flying is a passion of mine. And regardless of the outcome of all this, when I'm able to leave this chair a little over a year from now, you're going to start seeing me out there more because that's a passion. And so this will have no bearing on us as we're going to see each other a lot. So,
May I say two things?
yes, ma'am.
So I Googled the definition of economic development. It is in the economic study of the public sector, economic and social development is the process by which the economic well-being and quality of life of a nation, region, local community, or an individual are improved according to targeted goals and objectives. So I just wanted to share the definition of economic development because we talk about it and it's kind of a unicorn out there that nobody has really seen, but that's the definition of it. And I just want everyone to remember we are all obligated to serving this community. When you serve on a board or committee that we have asked you to serve on, ultimately, all of us serve the community as a whole, and not just the board or committee that entity that you are serving on. So ultimately, we all need to move forward together for the betterment of the community.
And I'm going to say tongue-in-cheek, you can blame Rob Coel for this because when Rob and I met probably 3 years ago, it was about striping on Main Street and that big controversy. And on a yellow pad, he said, because obviously we're going to talk about the airport, he said, you know, there is a way to reroute this road and create some extension. And so that's an answer. I applaud you for your creativity there, because it is the answer if it's ever going to get done. And so as a result of the ability to finally see an opportunity through various properties that want to be annexed, we may actually get there someday, Rob. If there's no further questions or comments, thank you all. Have a good evening. Have a good supper. We appreciate your time. We are motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Opposed, like sign. We're adjourned.
Can I move to go into executive session?